I didn't think it was possible to make a movie worse than Mortal Kombat Annihilation, but here we are, now available in paperback and e-readers. Isis, Revenge of the Cyber Goddess. The goddess next door takes on the threat of a deadly digital diva driven to destroy the world in this action-packed, all-new Isis series adventure. Get Isis, Revenge of the Cyber Goddess featuring a bonus pin-up and the other two books in the Cyber Goddess saga at online bookstores everywhere today. I had a chance to watch the reboot of Mortal Kombat on HBO Max this Saturday night. And I have to say, after watching this absolutely awful movie, it is one of the worst movies I have ever seen in my life. Now, I've seen my fair share of bad movies, from Your Dolomite all the way to Plan 9 from Outer Space to Halle Berry's Catwoman. And I have to say, Mortal Kombat is one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my life, practically surpassing even Ed Wood's Plan 9 from Outer Space and many of Tyler Perry's Madea movies. Now, I have to ask a critical question of Warner Brothers executives. How is it that you have 10 times the budget you had for the Mortal Kombat movies of the 90s, better special effects, and better actors, and you make a movie even worse than the previous Mortal Kombat movies, Mortal Kombat from 95 and Mortal Kombat Annihilation? Because what you presented on screen in this movie, calling itself Mortal Kombat, is a complete embarrassment to the franchise and a complete disappointment to anyone who has ever played the game. And as somebody who has been playing Mortal Kombat since Mortal Kombat 2 came out in the mid-90s, I can tell you this movie is nothing like the game. And the cutscenes from the Mortal Kombat reboot of the late 2000s and Mortal Kombat X and Mortal Kombat 11 practically blow the doors off whatever this movie is trying to do. And it's really embarrassing when a series of cutscenes in a video game put together a better story than what is presented in this absolute mess of a film. Now, the big mistake that is made by the producers of this Mortal Kombat film is not sticking to the source material. Now, your producers here decide to go out on the adaptation route, and because they're insecure about the source material, they decide to deviate by trying to introduce their own new character. Now, the producers here think that this new character will make the Mortal Kombat story more accessible to the reader or the viewer, but it just makes me and many old school MK fans extremely angry because it just shows how little they know about the story of Mortal Kombat. And the new character they introduced to be the lead character in this Mortal Kombat movie, Cole, is basically a Gary Stu. And what Gary Stews are self-inserts of a writer to make themselves be a part of whatever fantasy or science fiction world that they want to be a part of. Because that's what your Cole feels like in this movie. He feels like nothing more than a Gary Stu who is there to be with the Mortal Kombat characters and be in the tournament with the Mortal Kombat characters. He is not somebody we can relate to, and he isn't somebody we can care about, and that's what the executives were probably thinking when they were going to do with this character. Introduce this character to make us care about the franchise, but the franchise is already filled with great characters, and great characters who already tell compelling stories. And as I see it, you can't really do any sort of Mortal Kombat movie unless several core characters are in the lead role. And you need to have your Liu Kang as the lead, your Sonya Blade as the lead, and I'd have to say you'd have to have your Kano and your Jax as the lead characters, and even your Kung Lao. Now, all these characters, they have to be, and even Raiden, because all of those characters are important to moving the Mortal Kombat story along. and taking us into the outworld where the tournament is. And that's the other mistake that is made in this film, is that we're not focused on the outworld and the threat of these outworlders to the Earth realm. No, this film, because it feels more like Tyler Perry's Mortal Kombat, is about your Shang Tsung trying to kill off these people who are supposed to be the chosen ones, and he's supposed to kill them off so that they cannot participate in the tournament. And this deviation from the story practically derails the Mortal Kombat story of many of the characters, because the MK1 tournament was supposed to be all about this tournament that was supposed to decide the fate of the Earth realm. And this whole deviation talking about you had to have the dragon symbol on your body and you killed somebody and you got the dragon symbol, this deviation practically keeps us from having a variety of fighters who were core to the story. And when I looked at that whole point, I just said this is absolutely ridiculous, because when I look at Sonya's story and how they practically butchered Sonya's story was supposed to be all about her chasing Kano, the leader of the Black Dragon organization, all the way to this Mortal Kombat tournament. And she was supposed to get permission from her superior officer, Jackson Briggs, to go do this, but we don't see any of that exchange, because they decide to go out here and nerf your Jackson Briggs early in the movie. Now, that was one of the things that really irked me about this movie, was the way they did poor Jax, because anybody who has played Mortal Kombat 2 knows Jax was one of the most formidable players in the game. He was one of the most formidable characters in the game, and he was a double tough character you could use to advance up the ladder of the Mortal Kombat game. But in this movie, we get Jax practically jobbed out to Sub-Zero to show that this assassin is so dangerous, and that really messes up Jax's story, because if anybody who's again played the Mortal Kombat game knows that Sonya, as she's chasing Kano, gets captured, and that's the main reason why Jax has to come in Mortal Kombat 2, because he's looking for Sonya, and he's looking to try to free Sonya from being captured by Shao Kahn in Mortal Kombat 2. So they mess up both Sonya and Jax's story, and they have Sonya sitting up in some sort of, trailer park. And that was another thing that really irked me. I mean, Sonya is a part of Special Forces, and we needed to see Sonya being part of the Special Forces on this mission to capture Kano, and that again is core to her story. But instead of that, we get Sonya capturing Kano, and Kano practically only being used as comic relief, something that Johnny Cage is supposed to do. But they don't want to put Johnny Cage in this movie because they're busy pushing this Gary Stu into the movie and practically destroying much of the character development that is essential to the story. But after your Cole meets Sonya Blade, we get them and Kano going overseas and to this temple where they meet the characters who are really core to the Mortal Kombat video game, Liu Kang and Kung Lao. And sadly, both Liu Kang and Kung Lao are reduced to one-dimensional caricatures instead of being the essential characters they are to the original story. Now, when it comes down to Mortal Kombat, the two characters you really think of are Liu Kang and Kung Lao. And you think of Kung Lao because he is the descendant of the great Kung Lao, who beat all of these guys in the original Mortal Kombat that came before the video game. And Liu Kang because he is the lead character in your Mortal Kombat reboot, and he was the lead character all throughout the other sequels, Mortal Kombat X, and he was essential to your Mortal Kombat 11. So I would think you would want to be pushing Liu Kang into that lead role, but no, they wanted to go out here and go get this Gary Stu character of Cole and try to shoehorn in this role, minimizing many of the core characters. And when they get to the temple, Raiden tells them they're not ready, and they have to absorb some sort of power and to get powers. And that's where the movie goes from absurd to absolutely ridiculous, because this quest to get the powers really runs counter to everything that was in the game, because in the game everybody has their abilities and special moves before they even come into the tournament. I mean, Kano already had his laser eye, but in this movie they want to tell us that he gets it from this whole sort of anima thing or whatever it is, and that's absolutely ridiculous, and it just makes no sense. And then they want to tell us that he's going to get mechanical laser eye from this sort of powers and abilities, and then Jax is going to get his super bionic arms doubled in strength, all from this whole thing, and then Sonya gets these same powers the same way, and it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever, and it just does not fit organically into any sort of plot we've seen in any Mortal Kombat movie. So when I'm looking at this movie, I'm shaking my head, because this is nothing like any Mortal Kombat movie I have seen, and I just hated to see the complete lack of character development on any of the characters, especially on the bad guy side. I mean, every character here was reduced from being the rich multidimensional character they were in the cutscenes of the video games to becoming these cardboard cutouts that were just there to be either good or either be bad, and that they were less than what they were in the video games. And that was just absolutely sad, because all of those characters were fleshed out beautifully in the cutscenes of Mortal Kombat, Mortal Kombat X, and Mortal Kombat 11. I mean, if you think about the way those characters were developed in comparison to this movie, you shake your head, because it was just absolutely embarrassing to see many of these characters minimized and reduced to nothing in this film. Now, what was really even more disappointing to me than the way they underdeveloped many of these characters was they went out here, and instead of bringing in somebody who was essential to the Mortal Kombat storyline like Shao Kahn or Quan Chi, we get the vampire character from MK4. Now, anybody who knows the Mortal Kombat franchise knows that MK4 vampire character was one of the worst characters in one of the worst Mortal Kombat games, and they go dig her up and put her in this movie. So I was really looking at that and going, what? You brought her into this movie, but you don't bring in Katana, you don't bring in Sindel, you don't bring in anybody important, but you bring in the vampire character. And what was even more disgusting to me was, in addition to the way they completely mishandled Jax, was the way they did Reptile. Now, again, Reptile was one of the most formidable characters in Mortal Kombat all the way from Mortal Kombat 1, and Reptile was one of the most dangerous characters, and he got even better character development in the Mortal Kombat reboot, Mortal Kombat X, I believe. Now, Reptile is, again, one of the most dangerous characters in the game, and they, like Jax, they job out Reptile early in this movie, and the way they presented Reptile was absolutely ridiculous. I mean, he's a horrific reptilian creature, and they give us the lizard from the Amazing Spider-Man in a CGI suit, and we're supposed to believe that this lizard from the Amazing Spider-Man knockoff is supposed to be Reptile, and the way they did him was just absolutely wrong in this movie. And then they just have Kano kill him off early in the movie, but that's just not how Reptile goes out. And if you watch the video game cutscenes, you've seen the Reptile character practically be one of the most dangerous characters, and they practically clown him in this movie. And that was something that I was really just disappointed in seeing. I mean, Reptile, again, was one of the core characters from MK1. I mean, he was a hidden character, and when he came on the scene in MK2 and MK3 and all the way through the other games, he was a really, really boss character, and they just did him dirty in this movie. So I'm looking at this Mortal Kombat movie, and and one of the other things that irked me is you don't really see much combat, and you don't really see much character development. And the characters they bring to the screen, especially on the bad guy side, are really weak sauce, and we really don't get to see these characters really developed. I mean, you got your Cabal, who was kind of a lame even ever since he came out in MK3, and then you've got Melina, who is not really an interesting character until you bring in Katana and Jade, and she's just there to be the token female. And then you've got this other guy with the hammer, who is a bit of a jobber, and then you've got Goro, who's just brought in just to be like the Hulk in the Avengers, big and strong, but not really getting much character development. And all of these characters, they're just sitting there to be jobbed out in Tyler Perry's Mortal Kombat. And what was really annoying to me was seeing this Cole character taking on Goro in what I call one of the greatest Gary Stu moments I have ever seen in my life. Because that moment with Goro fighting your Cole really felt like bad fan fiction, because he gets powers in a Deus Ex Machina way, and he's out here beating Goro, a character that would possibly give Jax a hard time, and Jax is one of the stronger characters in the video games without the bionic arms. And this guy's going to come out here, get this power out of nowhere, and he's taking on Goro and beating Goro. And I looked at that as like, this is ridiculous, and it makes absolutely no sense. And it made even less sense because you have Raiden, who's in the background talking about he cannot fight in the tournament, but he fights in the video game. So that was really ridiculous to me, and it was even more ridiculous because this whole tournament, again, is not taking place on Earth at the temple or in Outworld. We're not even having a tournament. It's a knockoff tournament so that Shang Tsung won't be able to kill the fighters before the tournament. So where's the Mortal Kombat? That's another critical question I want to ask. I mean, Mortal Kombat is supposed to be the tournament, and everything is supposed to be about the tournament. I mean, this movie could have been an epic, spectacular film if they did it true to the source material. I mean, the whole idea of characters going to Outworld to fight in a live-action movie could have been amazing. I mean, you could have built a fantastic world like Ed Boon and John Tobias did with these characters, and you could have made an amazing film on the level of Zack Snyder's Justice League or Zack Snyder's Watchmen or some of the MCU movies. But because your Warner Brothers is filled with insecure executives, they wind up undermining their ability to make a great film. And their lack of confidence is clearly shown on screen, because instead of them having faith in what Ed Boon and John Tobias created almost 30 years ago, they decide to come in here and rewrite the story to fit what they believe will be appealing to audiences. Unfortunately, what they think will be appealing to audiences is something that alienated many longtime Mortal Kombat fans like myself, because instead of us seeing the Mortal Kombat game we grew up with coming to life on screen, we get an absolute hot mess of a movie that looks like something that Tyler Perry would put together. I mean, you may as well have called this Medea's Mortal Kombat and had Medea as an unlockable character with a pistol fatality and a purse fatality. I mean, that's how bad this movie is. I mean, this movie feels like one of those 1980s low-budget adaptations where they didn't have the budget to try, but the great irony is that Warner Brothers put at least $100 million into this movie and came out with something that isn't even worth a $5 food stamp without the book. I mean, where did all of that money go as related to this movie? Because I don't really see it on the screen. The special effects are terrible. The action sequences are bad. And what's really sad is we never get to see any of the characters doing any of their special moves the way they do them in the video game. So when I looked at it, it's like, yeah, Kano's got the laser eye, but he's not really known for that. And we don't really get to see, Sonya doing any of her special moves. And we get to see maybe Liu Kang do a bicycle kick here or there. And we get to see Kung Lao teleport. But we don't get to see classic things like Jax doing the gotcha grab. I mean, here it is, you have Jax fighting in the tournament. You don't see him doing the gotcha grab and giving the guy the punches with the gotcha grab. We don't see him doing the backbreaker. And we don't really get to see Shang Tsung morphing. I mean, Shang Tsung and Raiden are just in the background of this movie. And they are essential players in the story, but they're just there in the background like many of the other characters, so we can push Cole, the $2 Ultimate Fighter, who would probably be jobbed out like How, as related to a fatality like we saw in the Aaron Black when he makes his entrances. And I would have to say, Aaron Black, why wasn't he in this movie? Because he's a way more interesting character than any of the bad guys that they presented in this movie. And the way they did Scorpion was really bad. I mean, you had Scorpion, yes, his 7 minutes in the beginning were fantastic, but the way they handled the character later on as a Scorpion ex machina was really annoying, especially when you consider the way this character was really, he just came into his own in Mortal Kombat X and Mortal Kombat 11. I mean, Scorpion was taken to another level as a character, and they did him foul in this movie. And every one of the characters here was really done foul, and it's just an embarrassment because when you look at all of the cutscenes in Mortal Kombat, and I've seen many YouTubers just take all those cutscenes and put them together and make a movie. You could have made a fantastic Mortal Kombat movie just with those cutscenes alone, and you could have made a Mortal Kombat movie that would have been worthy of the video games and practically been a classic if you just took all the effort and energy you had with the cutscenes and made a movie like that. Because the cutscenes really develop the characters a lot better. It shows us something we care about, and that's what I liked about the cutscenes, is that they showed us this Earth realm being in jeopardy. It showed us the threat of the Outworld. It showed us the threat of Shao Kahn, and it also showed us the threats of others in the Outworld, like your Quan Chi, your Kotal Kahn, and even your Chronica. And we saw these threats being presented in a way that made us care. But when it comes down to this live action Mortal Kombat, it's just one big fatality and one big casualty for Warner Brothers, because this movie isn't going to be a blockbuster. This movie is going to be a gut buster. Most people are going to laugh at, because when they look at this film and they compare it to one of the worst films in the franchise, Mortal Kombat Annihilation, and see that it's even worse than that movie, which had almost 10 times less the budget and even worse actors. It just shows how embarrassing things are at Warner Brothers as related to management, because here they had an opportunity to make a great film, but when they didn't have the ability to execute on concept, they made a complete mess. And what's really sad, again, is that we have all of this great story lost, and it's embarrassing when you have cutscenes in a video game that are better than a movie that was supposed to restart a franchise. But that franchise, as I see it, even though they're trying to tease Johnny Cage, that franchise is dead on arrival. Now, if you want to see me do more movie reviews, you can donate to my Patreon, my PayPal, or my Cash App so I can continue paying for subscriptions like HBO Max, your Disney Plus, and your many other subscription services like Amazon Prime. And if you want to try some of my action-packed African-American fantasy fiction, like the ISIS series, the E-Steam series, the John Haynes series, and the books of the Spinsterella trilogy, you can find those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find them on Smashwords, the iBookstore, and Google Play. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, John Haynes, Taking Care of Business. The man who rules the world breaks in a brand new partner to help him take care of business in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes series adventure. Get John Haynes, Taking Care of Business at paperback and e-readers at online booksellers everywhere.